Welcome to our second video. In today's video on cinema, we're going to examine manipulation further, and specifically we'll be looking at codes, conventions, and genre, in that order. So let's begin with codes. To truly understand them, you have to think about the difference between a novel and a film, and the way story is told. In a novel, the author has so much space that he or she can fill with words. And they can go on for a long period of time about environment and character and even the thought process of a character. Now, if you think about it, a film cannot do that. A film is somewhere between, the short films, really short, could be 1 minute to 10 minutes, 20, 30 minutes, to a full film, which can be from an hour and a half to some films being 4 hours or more. So directors have to employ a different strategy when telling a story through film. And one of the things directors rely on are codes. Codes are quick ways to tell story. And I hate to get high school here, but we've got to get a little high school in the way we're going to be talking about codes. And when I talk about high school, maybe we're even talking middle school, because we're going to be dealing with stereotypes. So I want to launch right in. I want you to imagine you're watching a film, and into the mise en scène, or let's say the frame, walks a blonde woman. Now, I'm sure you thought about blondes as being dumb. It's part of what we have in our culture, and film after film after film supports blonde as dumb. And that's what I'm talking about getting middle school, or even high school-like. We also think that a blonde will probably be not wearing that much clothing. Blondes have more fun, which gives us this idea that blondes are sexually more loose. You may have come up with the idea that a blonde in a film always needs a man to save her. You may also have the idea that she loves money and wealth and gifts. All of these things you can find supported in different films. Now, let's look at the brunette in comparison. So take a moment to think. Okay, you probably came up with the idea that brunettes are intelligent. They are dependable. They are not as attractive, possibly, as a blonde. You may have come up with that they have more clothing than a blonde has. Oftentimes we see them in suits or leisure suits, more clothing altogether. There's not as much flesh revealed as there might be with a blonde. We also think that this brunette's going to be a friend of a blonde, or she's going to be a sidekick, or a really good friend is kind of the things we think about when we come up with a brunette. Now, let's go even further. What about a black woman? When you see a black woman walk onto frame, what are the kinds of things you're going to be thinking? And I know you're already going, well, it depends whether it is a black director or a white director. And you're probably correct. There's probably two very different ways that a black woman is put onto film, depending on who's behind the camera. So go ahead and take a moment to think. Now, potentially, if it's a white director, you're going to think that the black woman is angry, loud, in command, eats men up, right? And then when it comes to maybe a black director, you're going to get the idea of somebody who is dependable and beautiful and alluring. And she may even, in a black film, have a different lighting look than in a white film. And I am going to give you a research moment. Spike Lee, one of our great American directors, has talked about lighting people of color. And I want you to go and do a little bit of research on how a woman of color should be lit so that she is beautiful. Now you can stop the video here, or you can continue on and do that at the end of the video. Now, let's think about the leading man. What does a leading man look like, generally? Again, go ahead and take a moment to think. So I bet you thought of a man who is manly. Has muscles. He has a sharp jawline. He is charismatic. He is intelligent. He is a hero. He's somebody who can save the damsel in distress. We probably think that he's going to be tall. Now, all of these things are codes. And I want you to understand that none of these characters that I've asked you to look at have spoken when you first see them. These are things that our mind comes up with the moment we see these people. This is what judging is. And how this just comes up so quickly is because we're a product of our culture. And part of our culture is movies. And movies reinforce these stereotypes over and over and over again. And so we compare ourselves to these four character types that I've talked about. And either we're very much like them, or maybe we have to work harder to be like them, or maybe we feel terrible that we're not like them. On top of that, maybe you never see yourself in a film, and therefore you're not getting validation. That's one of the things about films, right? By seeing things, they either validate our experience or they invalidate our experience. And that's why films are so powerful. So now, let's move on to conventions. Conventions are different than codes. Codes are quick. They're visual or even auditory. So the moment you may hear someone with a southern accent, you may already go and say, you know, it's the judging thing going on, that middle school, high school thing that's been created through culture that sticks with us. When you hear that southern accent, you might think this character's a Republican. You might think that they are not as intelligent. You may think that they have really great manners, that they're really good cooks, that they're Southern hospitality. And then when you hear a British accent, maybe that gives you the idea that this person's going to be sophisticated, worldly, cultured. So codes are physical, they're auditory, they're based on body shape, clothing, and the sound of a voice. Where conventions are rules that have been set up in filmmaking that we learn through the osmosis of hearing stories and watching TV and watching movies in our youth. What is the color of night? I'm sure you guessed it. The color of night is blue. But have you ever gone outside and seen a blue night? Have you been in your bedroom and blue light is pouring through the window? Maybe there's some amber light from the street lamp, but night is blue. And that blue comes from the theater. Theater used blue light all the time to suggest to the audience that it was nighttime. And film picked up that convention of theater. In fact, planting a seed, lots of conventions are brought over from theater to film. Let's talk about another convention. What is one thing every single movie has? It does not matter the genre. And notice, I just used the word genre, which is going to be our next topic. So I'm planting a seed that we're going to grow really quick. So what is one convention every movie has, despite the genre? There's always a love story. It doesn't matter if it's a sci-fi, if it's a thriller, a western, an action-adventure, a drama. There's always a love story. And we expect that in all of our movies. And I want to know why. Why does there always have to be this story? I'm not going to answer that question. It's something that I want you to live with and think about. So other conventions that I find interesting, and there are so many. How many times have you come out of a movie and you paid this movie a compliment by saying it's realistic? Are films truly realistic? Are they really like life? And the answer is no. Because the other big convention is elliptical editing, where all unnecessary parts of the movie are cut out. Do we really need to see a car driving around the city to find a parking spot? So elliptical editing is another one of those conventions. And as you're reading our Graham Turner text, you're going to find more conventions that he brings up as well in his text. So let's move on to narrative conventions. Because narratives, the different kinds, the different genres of film, so we're actually going to blend narrative conventions and genre together a little bit. So genre is a way of categorizing story types. And within each genre, we expect certain elements to occur. So we would call these narrative conventions. So with a musical, right, and if you think about the intro to my first video, there's lots of musical clips in there. What are the expectations you have? What are you going to see in a musical movie? Go ahead and think about it. I bet you guessed correctly. You said things like characters break into song and dance, poppy colors, fantasy situations, love ballads, both really like get on your feet dancing kind of music and those ballads. Now think about what you're going to see in a Western. Our expectation are cowboys and Indians. The good guy wears white, the bad guy wears black. It's usually in the desert. There are horses. My favorite piece of tumbleweed is moving and rolling along the action. I just love that. I don't know why. We get big, open, vast landscapes. There's always a shootout. There's the saloon and a bar fight. And there's the great big, final shootout of the film itself. Okay, let's go with one more genre. And let's go with, we did musicals. Let's go with horror. Horror's always fun. So you probably thought about a dark environment. Maybe you thought about a haunted house or a haunted space or a haunted hotel. Maybe you thought about how there's the woman who's always running away from the monster and she trips and falls. And that monster is always moving so slowly. And you probably also thought about jump scares. Because, isn't that what we love going to the movies, to get scared and to jump in our seats? That's one of the best parts of a horror film. But here's where the manipulation really gets in. Think about what guarantees a character's death in a horror film. I know you've come up with at least one or two. Sex. If a character has sex in a horror film, they're going to die. If they do drugs, they're going to die. If they drink, they're going to die. So those are 3 out of many reasons that make a character die, along with one of the worst. And it's not so much in the newer horror films, but in older horror films, it's always a person of color or an LGBTQI person who will die first. It's just how horror films go. But understand the manipulation in that as well. So number 1, by this character dying first, this person of color or LGBTQI plus person, that says they're not as valuable as usually the white woman who ends up surviving in the end. But also, with the killing off because of sex, drugs, rock and roll, drinking, that also tells teenagers, if you do these things, you're going to get into trouble. It's an ideological choice. And we'll be talking about ideology further in the semester. So, now, it's time to summarize. What are the 4 things we talked about today? Take a moment to think. Hopefully, you came up with a further examination of manipulation. You came up with codes, conventions, and genre. And within there, if you came up with narrative conventions as well, that's a bonus. Great work. So thank you for watching the video. I hope you learned a lot, and I hope you keep growing over the entire semester. Have a great day. Bye-bye.